Welcome back, my moneymakers, to another episode of the Scotty Taylor Jr. podcast slash YouTube. So if you are watching this on YouTube, it's good to see you. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, wonderful to also see you metaphorically. Today's topic is super exciting. I'm going to talk all about real estate as an investment opportunity and specifically talk about my investment property that I purchased, because this is a topic that I get questions on all the freaking time. So if you are ready, let's dig in. Okay, so as I mentioned, today's episode is all about investment properties, specifically around passive income. Now, before I dig into my specific property, I want to walk through the three different types of real estate transactions that I am most familiar with that you can do for earning more money, right? So buying an investment property is kind of a very overarching concept, saying like buying stocks. Like there's lots of different stocks you can buy, lots of different investment properties you can also purchase. So I'll break it down for the three primary ones that I talk to a lot of my clients about, and then I'll explain why I picked the one I picked, and then you can make your decision on which one would be right for you if buying an investment property is right for you. And really, ultimately, what I want to convey in this episode to help you fully understand is the pros and cons of investment properties. So what are some of the great things? What are some of the shitty things? And then if you are interested in buying an investment property, I want you to have the baseline foundational knowledge of like, where should I even start? So if you're somebody who is like thinking about passive income, thinking about buying real estate, I want you to have like the foundational information to be like, is this even something I should be exploring? So that's what we're going to answer today in this episode. And then for those of you that are slightly more advanced, I'm actually going to walk you through my investment property and some of the numbers so you can start to decide how to find a property yourself, if a property in a certain area is right for you. If you've already been looking at properties, then it'll help you identify whether or not it's actually a good investment opportunity or not. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's three types of buying investment properties. So the first type is buying an investment property and holding it for long-term rentals. Meaning you buy a property, so you buy a duplex, you buy a single family home, you buy a condo, you buy an apartment complex, and you rent it out to an individual or a family for long-term lease, right? And usually leases are 1 year, sometimes 2 years. But this method of buying a property and leasing it out to somebody long-term creates a lot of stability. The person's going to be there for a year. You know you're getting that income for a year. I mean, unless they move out, but it's very stable. It's very consistent. So that's the good side of it. The downside of buying an investment property and having a long-term rental is sometimes you'll make a little bit less money. So if you were doing Airbnb or short-term rentals, you might make more money, but it's a little bit more risky. So that's the first type. And spoiler alert, that's the type that I have, but I'm going to go into the other two and explain the details behind them as well. The second type is you can buy an investment property for short-term rentals. So think about buying a property in a really popular area for destinations for vacations or weddings or bridal parties or bachelor parties, things like that. So maybe it's in Big Bear in California. Maybe it's in Vegas. Maybe it's in Palm Springs in California. Maybe it's in Martha's Vineyard or somewhere in upstate New York. Maybe it's in wine country in Sonoma in California. A lot of places in California, I guess, that people want to go. Yellowstone, right? Orlando, people go for Disney. Those are some ideas where people go there and typically they just want to rent a property for a period of time for like a week or 2 weeks. And so you can buy a property in a vacation spot and rent it out either on Airbnb, vacation rental by owner, VRBO. There's also Vacasa. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's VACASA. But there's lots of different tools you can use. You can use Facebook. You can use Craigslist. I mean, there's lots of different ways of listing your property online. And so the question is that an area that you want to get into? Because you can make more money for sure, right? Because you're charging a higher rate for a weekly amount or for a daily amount. But, you know, you'd have to have a cleaning crew come in. You have to make sure that the property is listed and has great pictures. So that shifts, right? And this is a really important point to make. That shifts the property purchase a little bit more to hospitality. Hospitality as in like hotels or motels. So if you have somebody moving in and out consistently, it's a lot of it is based, the price that you get is based on the reviews. It's based on how many stars you have, the location, the value, versus a long-term rental. There's no like reviews. Like you don't have reviews when there's renters typically on a property. When it's like a year-long lease, right? They just move in, they like the place, they just stay there. There's no like need to get a review, right? And get a 5-star review. But that's different if you're buying a place for short-term rentals. Because if you're listing it on some type of website where you want to get consistent income from people booking in advance, it needs to look good, you have to have good pictures. It's a whole other world to making money in that real estate property than it is in if you made a real estate investment and you just did long-term rentals. So that's the second type of real estate opportunity. And I'm actually going to go into 4. So you get a little bonus one. The third one is you can buy a property and flip it. So if you bought a single family home, again, apartment complex, doesn't matter what type of property, could be a duplex or a triplex. You purchased it, and let's say it's not in great condition. You can refurbish it, you can repair it, you can do some updates to it, you can get new furniture, you can get a new roof, like electrical system, whatever is needed. And then you can sell it for a profit. Now, this again has potential for high returns because you can buy a property for, let's say, 200,000 and then flip it for 250,000. That's a pretty sizable rate of return, right? That's 25% in a short period of time. So let's say you do it in a year. The downside or the difficulty with that is that's active income. I do not classify that as passive income. So if you're buying something and doing work to it and then selling it, that's active because you're not getting that income consistently, right? You're not getting it without doing any work. So that's really more active income than it is passive income. And in that world, you kind of need to know a little bit about houses, and you need to have good style, or like you need to hire people for that. So it's not an area I particularly think I'm very skilled at. Like I think I have an okay sense of style, but I don't think I'm like an expert. So I certainly wouldn't buy a place. I literally don't even know what like a screwdriver is. Like I'm just completely clueless. So I'm not going to buy a place and do that myself. But if somebody came to me, if a friend or, somebody else was like, hey, I found this property, I want to buy it and refurbish it and then resell it. If you want to invest in it, I'll do all the work. That would be something I would be open to, but I'm not going to go and do that on my own. There are a lot of real estate professionals that do that, whether they're realtors, they're in construction, they are mortgage brokers. Like there's a lot of people in the real estate world that do that, and they do that successfully. So I'm not the perfect person to help you with that area, but that's an option for you, right? So that's the third way of buying real estate for investment property purposes. And then the fourth way would be to actually buy some type of like office or land, right? So for example, you could buy a gas station, you could purchase a 7-Eleven, you could purchase the land underneath a 7-Eleven and just get rental income from that. You can purchase land in an area that's up and coming and then sell it later. So there's other options in real estate that are outside the scope of this conversation, but just know that there are other ways you can buy a laundromat, right? Like these are ways of generating income through real estate that may or may not be, they may require a lot of money up front, maybe not, like it kind of depends, but those are areas that you can also make money in real estate if you wanted to. So again, if you're listening to this and that like sparks something inside of you and you're like, holy fucking shit balls, I need to buy a gas station, that's a great idea, then do your research, look into it, run the numbers, see if it's a good idea. But if you're like, I'm just more of like a regular individual investor, I'm not trying to buy like a $2 million gas station, then potentially number 1 or number 2 in the real estate options are right for you. So buying a property for short-term rentals or for long-term rentals, right? So those are the 4 ways of buying real estate. So now let's talk about why you would want to buy real estate. Like, what's the reason to buy real estate? There's actually 3 primary benefits of buying real estate. Number 1, you can get passive income from real estate. Passive income is motherfucking sexy as hell. Like the number of times people ask me, how can I generate passive income? If I got $1 for every time, I would have thousands of dollars? I get that question all the time because the idea of it is very sexy. The idea of waking up and getting a deposit into your bank account and not working for it is really sexy, right? It's really fun, feels very freeing, very very like, oh, I'm like part of like the 1%. Like it just feels like it's something that wealthy people do. Now, it's not always that easy. So I'll walk into like some of the pitfalls of buying real estate for passive income purposes. So it's not quite just like so straightforward where you just buy a property and just receive a shit ton of money and you don't do anything, because it is a property and you are a landlord. But that's one potential benefit of real estate. The second potential benefit of real estate is capital appreciation. And capital appreciation is a fancy way of saying the price of the property goes up. So for those of you that are like, you've heard capital appreciation, you're like, I don't know what the fuck it means. Capital appreciation, right? So let's break it down. Capital is money or a value of an asset. Appreciation is going up. So when something appreciates in value, it goes up in value. So capital appreciation means the value of your investment portfolio or your property or whatever it is went up in value. So capital appreciation basically means that the value of your home went up. So if you buy a home for $200,000, you rent it out for a year and you sell it for $210,000, you just made a $10,000 profit. That's capital appreciation, right? And the third benefit or potential benefit is diversification. So if you have all of your money in one area, like crypto, NFTs. You're probably not watching this video if you do, but if you did have all your money in one of those areas, in the stock market, all your money in savings, this adds diversification because the real estate market is a different market than stocks and bonds. Now, in 2008, if anybody remembers, the stock market and the real estate market both plummeted. So it's not like they are completely uncorrelated at all, but they are just different markets. So if the stock market goes down because of a pandemic, for example, the real estate market maybe or maybe not would go down at the same time. More likely than not, certain areas, and it's really an individual property that would go up or down. So there's instances where cities as a whole will go down, but more likely than not, you're thinking about your individual property would go up or down in value based on the improvements that you've made, if people want to move into the area, all that good stuff, right? So real estate can be a great way to diversify your portfolio. All right, so let's now talk about my investment property, and I'll share with you the specifics of why I purchased an investment property, how much money I put down, what the rate of return is, all of that good SHIT, the details that you are dying to hear, I know. Okay, so when I searched for an investment property, I decided from the beginning that I wanted an investment property for passive income specifically. I wanted to do very little work in the property. I am not a real estate guru. I am not somebody who understands construction or electrical or any of that shit. So I wanted a property that would be as stress-free as humanly possible. So when I started searching for a property, I was looking for a property in the first category that I mentioned, which is buy and hold for long-term rentals. So when I was looking at properties to purchase, I specifically was looking at duplexes, triplexes, and 4 to 5 to 6 apartment complexes, right? So 4-unit, 5-unit, 6-unit apartment complexes. So think about like a small building, essentially a small building or a very, very large house that has 6 separate units in it. And that would be an apartment complex, right? So I was looking for an apartment complex, ideally a 3 to 4 unit apartment complex, because if you think about it, if you buy a single family home, and let's say for some reason somebody can't move in, you can't find a renter right away, you now have to pay the mortgage completely on your own if you take out a mortgage, assuming that you do. So if I bought a 4-unit or a 5-unit and one person wasn't there, I would still be able to use the rent from the other 3 or the other 4 to cover the mortgage. I just wouldn't receive as much profit. So that was really important to me. I didn't want to just buy a single family home, even though it could have been a great investment opportunity. I just didn't want to take that level of risk and have to pay a mortgage plus rent in my other place or another mortgage on my own house. Like it was just too much risk for me. So when I started looking, I filtered only for 2-unit, duplex, essentially 3-unit, 4-unit, 5-unit, or 6-unit. And I was open to like a 7 or 8-unit, but then the price started to get quite high. The second thing is the area in which I looked, I specifically started looking in Florida. I did a lot of research in California, which is where I was living at the time. In Los Angeles, I did research all over like Palm Springs area or Joshua Tree. I did research all over LA, and it is just very expensive in LA to buy an investment property. And the laws for landlords are not that favorable from my research. So I wanted to buy in a place where the laws were going to be in my favor as the landlord, so that I had a little bit more autonomy, a little more flexibility. If somebody wasn't paying, I could evict them, things like that. Again, I'm a really nice human, so I wouldn't probably do anything like that. But if somebody's living in your apartment for 6 months without paying rent, it's a business decision. You need to be really mindful of that. And in California, it's hard to evict somebody. So I decided to search in Florida, reason being that my dad has a house in Florida. I come to Florida pretty often. So I started looking in the Tampa, St. Petersburg area, which is on the west side of Florida. It's on the Gulf of Mexico. And that area specifically was great for me because it was about an hour from my dad's house. So I had a general idea of the area. Tampa and St. Petersburg are very up and coming cities. So I knew that there would be some good capital appreciation, and they're very young and LGBT friendly areas. So I didn't want to buy a place in an area that was like super anti-LGBT or something that would make me uncomfortable. So I wanted to make sure I was supporting and part of a community that I felt somewhat connected to. Again, just my personal preference. So when I started looking, I also did a search for like the general price of the property. So for an investment property, and this is really important, for me specifically, I had to put 25% down payment for the property. For a primary residence, there's more flexibility. Typically, you're better off working with your realtor and mortgage broker on those types of questions specifically. But for this investment property, I had to put 25% down because it's not going to be my primary residence. It's not going to be my specific residence where I live in. So I wanted to buy a place in Tampa, St. Petersburg. And in terms of purchase price, with 25% down, for a $500,000 property, that's quite a large amount of money, right? That's about $125,000. So in terms of how much money I personally had, I had about $150,000 of cash ready to go to invest in a property. So I didn't really want to spend more than $150,000. That was really like the upper limit. And that money was really saved up over the previous 2 years from my work, right? So my financial planning business, it was part of my investment portfolio. So I've been investing for a while. So I pulled some money from my investment portfolio to pay for the house. And so I didn't want to pull all my money out. So I still had maybe about $250,000 left in my investment portfolio, but I wanted to still be able to buy a property also, right? So I started looking at properties in the general price range of 400 to about 600,000. That was pretty much my band, more or less. Because what I found in this specific area was any property that was like 200,000 or 300,000 was in a really not so great area. So I did a search, and then I went to Google Maps and I literally mapped out all the properties that seemed to have good returns, right? And I'll walk through the returns in a minute. But then I just drove around the area. So I just explored the areas. I spent lots of time driving around to be like, am I comfortable here? Is this an area that I could see myself driving to if I needed to? Does it look like there's like good stuff around? Are there hospitals or schools nearby? Like what type of clientele are there? And a couple of the places that I drove by, I was like, oof, I do not feel all that safe here. So this is not an area that I want to buy in. Again, because personally, if I'm going to be having tenants in this place, I might have to interact with them. I might have to ask them for rent. And I'm a very non-confrontational person. And there's just different types of people that you can rent to. So I just wanted to rent to somebody who was like a working professional, somebody similar to me, but maybe in their early 20s, right? So somebody that couldn't afford a place quite yet, but was single, had a partner, maybe kid, maybe not, maybe dog, cat, whatever. I don't really care about that stuff. And somebody who would pay their rent on time, right? That was important to me. So I finally started searching, and I found out the certain areas that I actually really liked in the St. Petersburg and in the Tampa area. So now get ready, because this is the meat of it. And I want to walk you through specifically how to identify if a property is a good has a good rate of return or is potentially a good value for you when you purchase it in this specific section. So buying a property for long-term rental. Here is really the key to it. The number is 75%. 75% what? 75% should be your debt service coverage ratio. And I want you to write this down. So what does that mean? That means that the rent that you bring in should be the higher number of the two between rent and expenses. And your expenses should take up no more than 75% of the rent. So for example, if you have a property that you purchased that has rent of $4,000 a month, your expenses should be no more than $3,000 a month, right? That's 75% of $4,000 per month. So that's the golden number. 75% should be your debt service coverage ratio. And the rent is something that you're receiving. So it could be projected rent for the property. You can go on an app, on a website called Rent-O-Meter. That's R-E-N-T, the letter O, and then M-E-T-E-R, or you can go on Zillow to see the Zestimate, rentals Zestimate, things like that. You can also just look at other properties in the area to get a general idea of what the rent would be. And then from an expense perspective, you want to calculate what the mortgage would be, if there's going to be any private mortgage insurance or PMI, if there's going to be any homeowner insurance. You want to make sure that you factor in taxes. You want to make sure you factor in capital expenses. So if you're buying an investment property, a lot of times the realtor will show you, or if you look online, they'll show you like what the previous expenses have been for the property. So if there's like lawn mowing services, or there's like a custodian that takes care of the property, or I have a property management company that charges me 8% to manage my property, all of those go into the expenses. There's no way for you to get a perfect number typically, but you want to make sure that it's not like 80% or 90% or 100% right from the get-go. That's not going to be a great investment opportunity in my mind. So I wanted a place that was maybe 60%, 65%, meaning that the rent was, let's say, $4,000 a month and the expenses were like $2,500. So there's like a $1,500 difference, right? And so when I found a property, the property that I purchased was listed for 590, I think it was 599. So it was just about 600,000. I put an offer of 550. They declined it on the spot. They didn't even counter me. So I just went back to them. I was like, fine, I'll do it for 590, 599, whatever it was. And then during the inspection and appraisal process, the appraisal actually came back at 562 and they wanted 599. They were not willing to budge. I was not willing to go above 562. Again, longer story behind that. They finally acquiesced and they said yes to 562. So I ended up buying my property for $562,000. I put 25% down. So it was about $140,000 with closing costs, all in all. And now my mortgage is about $420,000 or $440,000, somewhere in that general range after closing costs. And now my mortgage on a monthly basis, including taxes and homeowners insurance, is about $2,500 a month. The rent that I bring in is $4,300 a month, every month from the 4 tenants that live there. So every month I profit about $1,800. I net about $1,800. Now I do pay a property management company. I just had electrical expenses of $11,000 come up. So it's not a perfect, smooth sailing situation. But the key that I looked to before buying was, am I going to get at least 75% debt service coverage ratio? So now that you know all the numbers from my individual property, I want to ask you, or have you think about a couple things, or a couple other of the downsides of real estate. The electrical expenses that came up recently cost me about $11,000. Was I expecting that? No. Was I prepared for it? Yes, I had the money ready to go. But there are a lot of things that come up that could potentially create additional expenses for the property. There are times when there are tenants that move out and we don't find a renter right away, so I lose rent for a month or two. I also have to pay taxes on the income that I receive. That is a big one. People don't realize you have to pay income taxes on the money that you receive from rental income. You don't just get to put it in your pocket and just ignore the IRS. They know, right? And so all in all, I'm super happy with my decision, right? The prices in this area are skyrocketing. I could probably sell the property for $100,000 profit right now after about a year. So I purchased my property in September of 2020. And I could probably sell, and I'm recording this in December of 2021. I could probably sell for a pretty sizable profit. But for now, I just appreciate having real estate as an additional part of my portfolio. I didn't want to buy a primary residence right away in different areas because I really like moving around. I really like having no ties to where I live, just being able to get up and go with my puppy and rent fully furnished apartments like this one. I'm renting this fully furnished 3-bedroom apartment in Miami, which I absolutely love. I mean, they did a great job decorating. That was not me, unfortunately. As I told you, I'm not really skilled in that. So that's why I was like, oh, perfect. It's already done for me. And this is awesome. So the property itself is a great source of revenue. It's a great source of diversification, but it's not as fucking easy as people think it is. It takes a lot of energy and work, and it does cost a lot to actually purchase a property. I needed to have a pretty big sizable down payment, but if you live in an area or if you have eyes on an area that's maybe cheaper, maybe there's properties for 200,000 or 150,000, and you could put 25% down to buy one, you can start building up your portfolio. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to build up my investment portfolio, continue to make more money, continue to save as much as I can, and buy more properties in the future, continue investing in my investment portfolio, and just build my net worth as efficiently and effectively as possible. And who knows, maybe one day I'll have a whole team of real estate that's bringing me in $50,000 or $100,000 a month, and I can just not work and I don't have to do anything, and I can just receive that money. I mean, knowing me, I'll be working forever because I fucking love working. I mean, I love recording things like this, and this is so much fun. But I'm curious if you have questions. If you want me to dig deeper into the real estate world, I'm happy to. Feel free to email me, assistant@scottytaylorjr.com, or shoot me a DM on Instagram at Scotty Taylor Jr. And that's Scotty, Scottie. That's the way that I spell my name. And if you want any more topics or ideas covered, feel free to reach out to me and I can factor that into my brainstorming process and see if we can record a topic on that. I love you. I support you. I'm always here for you. Have a blessed, amazing motherfucking day and go after it.